Heidi ho, neighbor. This is Joe Gilder. This is episode 15 of Mixed Together. In this episode, we're going to deal with bass. I don't think it'll take very long, but you just never know. Sometimes bass can be tricky. So we are at a point where the overall instrumental mix I'm really digging. The one thing I heard in the last listen through was the low end and the bass felt a little wonky to me. And because no room is perfect when it comes to bass, and my room isn't perfect when it comes to bass, when I get to a certain point, I like to check these things on headphones. These are my Sennheiser HD650s. They actually have a nice, decent low end. A lot of mastering guys like to use them. So I'll be turning my speakers off for this episode and just listening on here to check that low end. Reference mixes, all those things are good. But for now, I'm really just checking the low end on these to see if I like it. So I'm just going to go leave the vocals off and just go to a section of the song, probably a chorus. Maybe let's go here. We'll go right there. And all I'm going to do is listen. That was a little loud. And see if I like what I hear. I probably won't, and I'll make some changes. Sorry, I got distracted. Needed to do one quick thing to that Les Paul guitar, make it a little bit better. Okay, back to bass. So one thing to do, if you're not sure if the bass has the right amount of low end, try not to jump in there and just start boosting, cutting bass, because you're going to lose your reference pretty quick. What I like to do is to start by just playing the track and then muting the bass and seeing what leaves the mix. If I mute the bass and it still has a ton of low end, then probably means the guitars or keyboards or something else, kick drum, are having too prominent of a presence in the low frequencies, so I need to maybe tame those down until the bass can come through. Or if the low end disappears entirely, then I'll probably have a decent amount of bass there, or maybe it's certain low mid frequencies that are causing it to feel a little more stuck. So that's what we're going to do now. It actually feels really good. Like it's when he goes down to the really low notes, he's way down on that 5 string. I think that's what he played on this one. I dig it, but I think there's just still a little bit of overall low end, kind of big picture low end, kind of low mid that feels a little much, that if we tame that down, I think would work. Here's what I'm going to do. This is kind of not, doesn't make a lot of sense, but when I've done work, so, for example, I've done EQ on this. We've done videos. If you've seen it, if you've watched this entire series, I've already messed with the bass. I've added distortion. I've added EQ, and so I'm to a point where I was obviously happy with this tone at some point in the past. So I don't want to go in and negate that too quickly. So what I do in those situations, I just made that a different color. That's interesting. What I do in those situations is I like to sometimes add a second EQ. There's really no negative to this other than I can now just EQ what I'm hearing now. I don't have to go in and change some of these things because these decisions were made for a reason. Those are kind of like corrective decisions. It needed a little bit of that low mid, and there was a frequency there that was standing out, and then I'm going to boost over here. So over here, I kind of feel like, especially at this point in the mix, I'm wanting more of a clean slate, just to do an overall tone shaping on the bass. So that's what I'm going to do now, listening now in context of the entire mix for the most part. Okay, so that's the annoying frequency. It turns out that was the one we cut earlier. So I'm gonna, since it's actually something I already have in there, I will take back everything I just said. We'll get rid of this EQ. And we'll just go back to this one because we already have the exact spot there that I think needs to be adjusted, which is 124 hertz. We're just gonna take this and make it lower and maybe a little wider. Okay, here's a cool example of, in that little key change section, which is a cool part of the song over here. There was some frequency that was bothering me, so we started listening, it started playing, and I heard this kind of woo 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 woo, a little bit higher frequency that was messing up. And it sounds like a bass frequency, so like I just said before, I muted the bass. And I still hear it. Hear that woo woo woo. What is that? Is that guitar? It is. It's one of these guitars. Interesting. So the palm mute on this guitar has some sort of weird frequency that's being weird. So let's just throw another EQ on here so we can just see what it is. That's interesting. So that's made that better, but will that ruin the guitar tone for the rest of the song? Let's go back to the end. Let's mark this real quick. Key change. Let's go back to the beginning of the song. Oh dear, what did I just do? Undo, normalize. I was trying to go shift. I hit the wrong button. No, stop it. Okay. I think it sounds okay. Let's listen on like a chorus. Okay, cool. It hasn't, doing this kind of dramatic EQ on that guitar part hasn't really made it sound any different in the normal key, but it improved the sound of the key change section. Here it is without EQ. Hear that woo. With this big EQ, we took that out. You can still hear it a tiny little bit, but I bet in the mix we don't hear it nearly as much now. All case in point, sometimes we think the bass is our problem and it's something low frequency, it's bass frequencies, but it's not the bass guitar. I'm glad that I didn't go trying to find that frequency on the bass and doing huge cuts and not being able to really solve the problem and making the bass sound bad in the process. Now the bass feels good, that guitar's not making that weird funk noise, and we're in good shape. So great lesson today. If you think you know what the problem is, double check to make sure you're working on the right track. It may be a problem somewhere else. If you're working on the bass and there's a low end problem, it could be the kick drum, it could be a guitar, or it could be the bass. Take an extra just 2 seconds to click the mute button and see if the problem goes away. If the problem goes away, whatever you muted is the problem. So I did that. I muted the guitars and the problem went away. And then I went and found the exact guitar that was the problem, and then I honed in and fixed it. I mean, it's really just problem solving. If you ever watched the movie The Martian or read the book, it's all about this dude that gets stranded on Mars, and he literally is in a pretty crappy situation, and the whole book is just him saying, okay, I have all these problems. This is the one I need to focus on now, and here's what I'm going to do to focus on it. And I'm going to fix it. I'm going to move on. It's the same thing with mixing. Mixing is like being stranded on Mars. You just find a problem. What's the most pressing problem? What's the problem that needs to be addressed next? And then you address it. That's the way I've kind of done these videos. What problem am I going to solve in this video? We have solved that problem. So in the next video, I think we can move on to that vocal thing that was bothering me in the last video. And we'll just keep trudging along until the spaceship comes back and picks us up and takes us home to Earth. Okay? Sound good? I'm so weird. See you later.